Ryan had always been the careful type. You know, the kind of person who checks the weather forecast 3 days in advance, who saves receipts, who never forgets to floss. His life was organized down to the smallest detail. He worked as a financial analyst at a mid-size firm downtown, the kind of job where you wear the same 3 suits on rotation and know exactly what each day will bring. His apartment was clean, his bills were paid on time, and his weekends followed a comfortable pattern. Saturday mornings at the gym, Sunday afternoons meal prepping for the week ahead. It was boring, maybe, but it was safe. It was controlled. And for 28 years, that had been enough for him. That Friday night, though, something felt different. The week had been particularly exhausting. Numbers had been swimming in his head for days, and his boss had been pushing everyone hard to close out the quarterly reports. Ryan needed a drink and some space to breathe. He decided to stop by this little jazz bar he'd been to a handful of times before. The Velvet Room, it was called. Nothing fancy, just a dim, cozy spot with decent music and even better whiskey. The kind of place where you could sit alone without feeling lonely. He found his usual spot at the bar, ordered his drink, and let the music wash over him. A saxophone was playing something slow and melancholy. The bartender knew him by now, gave him a friendly nod but didn't push conversation. Ryan liked that. He was halfway through his second glass when the door opened and she walked in. It's hard to explain what it was about her. She wasn't dressed up or trying too hard. Just jeans, boots, and a leather jacket draped over one shoulder. Her hair was dark and a little wild, like she'd been somewhere windy. But it was the way she moved that caught his attention. Confident. Easy. Like she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. She scanned the room with these sharp, curious eyes, and when they landed on him, Ryan felt something shift in his chest. It was like being seen for the first time in years. She walked straight to the bar, and despite all the empty stools scattered around, she chose the one right next to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something smoky and sweet. She ordered a whiskey neat and then turned to him with this smile. Not a polite smile. Not a friendly stranger smile. It was the kind of smile that said she already knew something about him that he didn't know about himself. "You look like someone who plays it safe," she said, her voice carrying just a hint of teasing. Ryan blinked, caught off guard. "Is that a bad thing?" She shrugged, still smiling. "Depends on what you want out of life, I guess." And just like that, they were talking. Her name was Lena. She told him she was a photographer, the freelance kind who traveled for work. She'd just gotten back from covering an underground music festival upstate and was leaving again in a few days for something else she couldn't quite explain yet. She talked about her life like it was an adventure. Like every day held the possibility of something unexpected. She'd been to protests, she said, to concerts in abandoned buildings, to places most people only saw in movies. She showed him photos on her phone, images full of raw emotion and energy, faces caught in moments of pure feeling. Ryan found himself leaning in, asking questions, sharing things he usually kept to himself. He told her about his job, expecting her to find it boring, but she seemed genuinely interested. She asked him why he chose that career, what he liked about numbers, whether he ever felt trapped by routine. No one had ever asked him questions like that before. His friends talked about sports and weekend plans. His coworkers talked about the stock market. But Lena wanted to know what made him tick. "You seem like you're holding yourself back," she said at one point, her eyes locked on his. "Like you're waiting for permission to actually live." The words hit him harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because he'd been thinking the same thing for months but hadn't been able to put it into words. He'd been going through the motions, checking boxes, following the script he thought he was supposed to follow. When had he last done something spontaneous? When had he last felt truly excited about anything? They talked until the bar closed. The bartender had to practically kick them out. Standing on the sidewalk outside under the glow of streetlights, Lena pulled out her phone. "Give me your number," she said. Not a question. A statement. Ryan typed it in, his fingers fumbling slightly. She grinned and sent him a text right there so he'd have hers. Then she slung her jacket over her shoulder and started walking away. "See you around." "Safe guy," she called back over her shoulder. Ryan stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the night, feeling like something significant had just happened even though he couldn't quite name what it was. He went home that night and couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying their conversation, the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd made him feel like there was more to him than spreadsheets and schedules. Saturday morning, his phone buzzed. It was Lena. She was inviting him to a rooftop party that night. Some artist friends of hers were celebrating a gallery opening. Ryan's first instinct was to say no. He didn't know these people. He had his gym routine, his meal prep plans. But then he thought about what she'd said. About playing it safe. About waiting for permission to live. He texted back, "What time?" That night changed everything. The party was nothing like anything Ryan had experienced before. It was held on the roof of an old converted warehouse in a part of the city he rarely visited. There were maybe 50 people there, all of them creative types. Artists, musicians, people who made their living doing things Ryan had never considered as real careers. They dressed differently, talked differently, saw the world through completely different eyes. And Lena moved through it all like a queen, introducing him to everyone, pulling him into conversations, making sure he felt included. Ryan met a guy who made sculptures out of recycled metal. A woman who wrote poetry and performed it at underground clubs. A couple who traveled the country in a van, documenting small-town America through film. They all had stories, real stories about taking risks and following dreams and living on their own terms. And they all seemed to genuinely like Lena, to respect her, to light up when she entered a room. As the night went on and the city lights sparkled below them, Lena found Ryan standing by the edge of the roof looking out at the skyline. She came up beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You having fun?" she asked. "Yeah," Ryan said, and he meant it. "This is different, good different." She smiled, that dangerous smile again. "You know what your problem is? You think life is supposed to be predictable, but the best things, they're always a little bit scary." Ryan looked at her, at the way the city lights reflected in her eyes, at the way she seemed so alive, so present, so free, and in that moment he made a decision. Maybe it was the whiskey, maybe it was the atmosphere, or maybe it was just that he was tired of being safe, tired of playing by rules that no one had ever actually explained to him. "Then maybe I need a little more scary in my life," he said. Lena's smile widened. "Oh, I think that can be arranged, and that's how it started." That's how Ryan, who had spent his entire adult life avoiding risk, avoiding uncertainty, avoiding anything that might disrupt his carefully constructed world, fell headfirst into something he couldn't control. He didn't know it yet. But that night on the rooftop was the beginning of the most intense, complicated, beautiful, and devastating 6 months of his life, because Lena was dangerous in ways he couldn't yet see, and he wanted every single moment of it. The next few months felt like Ryan had stepped into someone else's life. Suddenly his calendar wasn't just filled with work meetings and gym sessions. Lena had a way of appearing out of nowhere with plans that couldn't be ignored. She'd text him at 11 at night with an address and nothing else. He'd show up to find an art show in a basement gallery, walls covered in photographs that made him feel things he didn't have words for. Or she'd call him on a Tuesday afternoon while he was at his desk, buried in spreadsheets, and convince him to leave early. They'd drive to the coast with the windows down, arriving just in time to watch the sunset from a rocky beach he'd never even known existed. His coworkers started noticing. Ryan, who had always been the first to arrive and the last to leave, was suddenly ducking out at 5. Sometimes earlier. His boss mentioned it once, casual but pointed. Ryan just shrugged it off. For the first time in his life, work wasn't his priority. There were more important things, more exciting things. There was Lena. His best friend Derek was the first to say something. They'd been friends since college, the kind of friendship built on familiarity and routine. They met for coffee every Sunday morning without fail. Except Ryan had missed the last 2 Sundays. When they finally got together, Derek didn't waste time with small talk, so, "Who is she?" Derek asked, stirring his coffee slowly. Ryan felt himself smile without meaning to. "Her name's Lena, she's a photographer. And she's got you skipping our coffee dates and leaving work early." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Must be serious." "It's not like that," Ryan said, though even as the words came out, he knew they weren't true. "It was exactly like that. She's just different. She makes me want to do different things." Derek studied him for a moment. "Different isn't always better, man. You've known her, what, 3 months? And you're already talking about going to Guatemala with her? That doesn't sound like you at all." Ryan felt defensive. Maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm tired of being predictable. There's a difference between trying new things and completely changing who you are for someone you barely know, Derek said carefully. "Just be careful, okay?" But Ryan didn't want to be careful. He'd been careful his entire life, and where had it gotten him? A nice apartment he barely spent time in anymore? A retirement account that wouldn't matter for decades? Lena had opened a door to a different kind of existence, one where every day held possibilities, where life was meant to be felt deeply rather than managed efficiently. She challenged him constantly. They'd stay up until 3 a.m. debating politics, art, the meaning of success. She'd question everything he thought he believed in, not to tear him down but to make him think harder, dig deeper, figure out what he actually valued versus what he'd been told to value. The physical part of their relationship was intense too. Lena approached everything with the same fearless energy, and being with her felt electric in ways Ryan had never experienced. But it was unpredictable. She'd disappear for days at a time on assignments, sending him occasional photos from wherever she was but offering little explanation. Then she'd show up at his door at 2 a.m. with takeout food and stories that made his normal life feel impossibly small. He learned to stop asking when he'd see her next. Learned to exist in the uncertainty of it. Some part of him even started to like it, the way it kept him on his toes, kept him from falling back into old patterns. When she was around, his apartment felt alive. Her stuff was everywhere. Camera equipment scattered across his living room floor. 3 different leather jackets hanging by the door, because she could never remember which one she'd left where. Books with strange titles and notes scribbled in the margins by people he'd never met. His sister, Nicole, was less diplomatic than Derek when she finally met Lena. It was at a family dinner Ryan had been dreading. His parents were in town, and Nicole had insisted he bring this mysterious woman everyone kept hearing about. Lena had charmed his parents easily enough, asking his dad about his construction business, complimenting his mom's cooking. But afterward, when Lena went outside to take a call, Nicole cornered him in the kitchen. "Ryan, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's got you completely twisted up. Mom and Dad might not see it, but I do. You're not yourself around her. You're trying to be someone you're not." "Or maybe I'm finally figuring out who I actually am," Ryan shot back. Nicole crossed her arms. "She's using you. Can't you see that? She gets to live her wild, adventurous life, and when she needs a safe place to land, you're right there waiting. What do you get out of this?" "I get to feel alive," Ryan said quietly. Nicole's expression softened. "You can feel alive without losing yourself, you know." But Ryan wasn't sure that was true anymore. Maybe feeling alive required some kind of sacrifice. Maybe comfort and adventure couldn't coexist. Lena made him question everything, including whether the life he'd built was actually the life he wanted. Late one night, Ryan's phone rang at almost 3 a.m. It was Lena, and her voice sounded different. Shaky, scared. She was at a protest that had turned violent. She described police in riot gear, tear gas, people running and screaming. She was hiding in a doorway trying to catch her breath, and she'd called him. "I just needed to hear your voice," she said. And for once she sounded vulnerable. "I needed something solid." Ryan stayed on the phone with her for over an hour, his heart racing, unable to do anything but listen and reassure her that she'd be okay. When she finally got back to her car and said she was safe, he realized his hands were shaking. This was her life. Chaos and danger and uncertainty. And he was choosing to be part of it. But even as the fear coursed through him, there was something else too. She'd called him. Out of everyone in her life, all those artists and activists and adventurous friends, she'd called him when she was scared. That had to mean something. That had to mean he was more than just a safe place to land, right? He didn't sleep the rest of that night. Instead, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out when exactly his careful, organized life had become something he barely recognized. His apartment was messier. His calendar was chaotic. His bank account had less padding than it used to, because spontaneous road trips and last-minute concert tickets added up faster than he'd expected. But when Lena showed up at his door 2 days later, exhausted and still a little shaken but smiling that dangerous smile, Ryan pulled her inside and held her close. And for those moments, with her in his arms, everything else seemed worth it. The confusion, the uncertainty, the way his old life was slowly slipping away. Because this felt real in a way nothing else ever had. This felt like living. Even if some quiet voice in the back of his mind was starting to wonder what the cost of all this living might eventually be. The cracks started small. So small that Ryan almost didn't notice them at first, or maybe he just didn't want to. It started with money. Lena borrowed $40 one afternoon, said she'd left her wallet at home and needed gas to get to an assignment. Ryan handed it over without thinking twice. A week later, it was $80 for some camera equipment repair she couldn't cover until her next paycheck came through. Then $150 because her landlord was being difficult about rent and she just needed a bridge loan for a few days. Ryan never saw any of it paid back, but Lena always had explanations. The magazine was late processing her payments. Her bank had frozen her account over some suspicious charge she was disputing. The client who owed her money kept pushing back the payment date. It all sounded reasonable, and whenever Ryan felt a flicker of doubt, Lena would look at him with those intense eyes and remind him that money was just paper, that what they had was more important than dollars and cents, and he'd believe her, because he wanted to. Then there was the night with his laptop. Ryan had left it open on his desk while he went to grab a drink from the kitchen. When he came back, there was an email notification from his bank about unusual account activity. His stomach dropped. He clicked through and found charges he didn't recognize, small ones mostly. Coffee shops and restaurants in cities Lena had recently visited for her photography work. A hotel in Philadelphia, a gas station in Baltimore. When Lena came over that evening, Ryan asked her about it, carefully, gently. He didn't want to accuse her of anything, but he needed to understand. She looked at him like he was being ridiculous. "Baby, I told you about that," she said, laughing a little. "Remember? My card wasn't working and I had an emergency. I asked if I could use yours. You said it was fine." Ryan tried to remember. Had there been a conversation like that? The past few months had been such a blur. Late nights, early mornings, constant movement. It was possible he'd forgotten. He'd been distracted lately, his mind always half somewhere else. "I don't remember," he admitted. "You were half asleep," Lena said, coming over to kiss his cheek. "I felt bad waking you, but I really needed it. I'll pay you back this week, I promise." She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly that Ryan felt foolish for even bringing it up. Maybe he had forgotten. Maybe he was being paranoid. His friend Derek's warnings had gotten into his head, made him see problems where there weren't any. He let it go, but the pattern continued. Lena's disappearances got longer. What used to be 3 days turned into a week. Then 10 days. She'd text occasionally, sending him beautiful photos from wherever she was, but the details got vaguer. When he asked about her assignments, she'd give vague answers about sources she couldn't reveal, or contacts who wanted to remain anonymous. It all had the ring of truth, or at least plausibility. She was a photojournalist after all. Confidentiality was part of the job. When she'd finally come back, she'd be different somehow. Tired, maybe a little distant at first, but then she'd pull him close, tell him how much she'd missed him, show him incredible new photos that took his breath away. She'd open up about her childhood, about growing up with a father who was never around and a mother who was too around, suffocating and controlling. She'd cry sometimes, talking about how hard it was to trust people, how everyone in her life had always let her down, everyone except Ryan. "You're different," she'd whisper against his chest. "You actually see me." And Ryan would feel guilty for ever doubting her. Here was this incredible, talented, damaged person who'd chosen him, who trusted him with her secrets, her fears, her broken pieces. The least he could do was trust her back. His friends started to drift away. Derek stopped calling as much after Ryan canceled on him 3 times in a row. His work buddies stopped inviting him to happy hour. Even Nicole kept her distance, their last conversation having ended in an argument about Lena that neither of them wanted to revisit. Ryan told himself he didn't mind. He had Lena. What else did he need? But then came the night that changed everything. Ryan was at a gallery opening, one of those art world events Lena dragged him to semi-regularly. She'd gone to the bar to get them drinks, and Ryan was standing awkwardly by a painting he didn't understand when a man approached him. Tall, maybe in his mid-30s, with the kind of casual confidence Ryan had never quite managed. "You're here with Lena, right?" the man said. Ryan nodded, immediately on guard. "Yeah, do you know her?" The man's expression shifted to something between pity and recognition. "I'm Daniel. I dated her about a year ago." Ryan felt his chest tighten. "Oh. Look, man, I'm not trying to start anything," Daniel said, glancing over his shoulder to make sure Lena wasn't nearby. "But I feel like I should say something. I was where you are. Completely crazy about her. Thought we had something real. She was amazing, right? Made you feel like the most important person in the world." "She still is amazing," Ryan said defensively. "I'm sure she is. But here's the thing. I lasted 8 months. Thought I could save her. Fix whatever was broken, be enough for her. Daniel paused. I wasn't, and you won't be either. She's chasing something none of us can give her. I don't even think she knows what it is. Ryan wanted to argue, to tell this stranger he was wrong, that what he and Lena had was different, but the words wouldn't come. Because in that moment, everything Daniel was saying resonated with something Ryan had been feeling, but refusing to acknowledge. The constant sense of being slightly off balance. The feeling that no matter what he gave, it was never quite enough. The way Lena's needs seemed to shift like sand, impossible to pin down or fully satisfy. I'm just trying to help, Daniel said quietly. Good luck, man. You're going to need it. He walked away before Ryan could respond. When Lena came back with their drinks, she was in a great mood, chattering about some photographer she'd just been talking to. But Ryan barely heard her. His mind was replaying Daniel's words over and over. Was he right? Was Ryan just another in a line of men who thought they could be what Lena needed? That night, Lena was particularly attentive, particularly loving. She seemed to sense something had shifted, and she responded the way she always did when she felt Ryan pulling away emotionally. She reminded him how good they were together, how he understood her in ways no one else did, how she'd never felt this way about anyone before. And like always, it worked. Ryan let himself be pulled back in, let himself believe that this time would be different, that their connection was stronger than whatever had come before. But lying in bed afterward, with Lena asleep beside him, Ryan stared at the ceiling and admitted something to himself for the first time. He was scared. Scared of losing her. Scared of what staying with her might cost him. And most of all, scared that Daniel was right. That he was caught in something he couldn't control, chasing someone who would never stop running long enough for him to actually catch her. The foundation was cracking. Ryan could feel it. But he still wasn't ready to let go. The beginning of the end came on a Thursday afternoon. Ryan was at work, trying to focus on a financial report that was due by end of day when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Is this Ryan Castellano? A professional female voice asked. Yes, this is Ryan. This is Jennifer calling from the fraud department. At First National Bank, we've flagged some suspicious activity on your account and wanted to verify a few transactions with you. Ryan's blood went cold. What kind of activity? We have several large purchases made in the last 48 hours. Camera equipment totaling $3,000. Airline tickets to Morocco for $2,000. Hotel reservations in Marrakesh. And a cash advance of $8,000. Did you authorize these transactions? The room seemed to tilt. $8,000. No, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't authorize any of that. The woman on the phone went through the standard procedures. They'd freeze his card immediately, start an investigation, file a fraud report. Ryan answered her questions mechanically, but his mind was racing. Morocco. Lena had mentioned Morocco once, weeks ago, said it was her dream assignment. But she'd never said anything about actually going, and she certainly hadn't asked him to pay for it. He tried calling her. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Ryan left work early, making some excuse to his boss about a family emergency. He drove to Lena's apartment, the place she'd said she'd been living for the past 6 months. The building was in a rough part of town, which she'd explained away as all she could afford on a freelancer's budget. Ryan had never questioned it. He buzzed her unit, no answer. He tried calling again from the lobby. Nothing. A neighbor came out and Ryan caught the door before it closed. He took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, found the door with her apartment number and knocked. Then knocked louder. Lena? Are you in there? A door opened across the hall. An older woman peered out. You looking for the girl in 3C? Yes, Ryan said. Have you seen her? The woman shook her head. Haven't seen anyone in that apartment for weeks. Pretty sure it's empty. Landlord was looking to rent it out last month. Ryan felt the floor drop out from under him. That's not possible. My girlfriend lives here. The woman gave him a sympathetic look. Sorry, honey, but nobody's been living in that unit. I've been here 20 years. I know when an apartment's occupied. Ryan stumbled back down the stairs, his mind reeling. If she didn't live there, where did she live? He thought about all the times she'd said she was home, all the times she'd claimed to be too tired to come over because she had an early morning. Had it all been lies? He drove around aimlessly for a while, trying to process. Then he remembered some of the friends Lena had introduced him to. There was Victoria, an artist who'd been at that first rooftop party. Ryan had her contact info from a group chat Lena had added him to months ago. He pulled over and sent her a message asking if she knew where Lena was staying. Victoria's response came quickly. Honestly, I barely know her. We've met maybe 3 times total. She just shows up at events sometimes. Ryan stared at his phone. What? Victoria had seemed like a close friend. Lena had talked about her all the time. He messaged another person from that group chat. Similar response. Yeah, Lena's cool, but I wouldn't say we're friends. She's more of an acquaintance. One by one, the pieces of Lena's life that Ryan thought he knew fell apart. The close friendships weren't real. The apartment was fake. He called the photography magazine she'd said she freelanced for most often. After being transferred 3 times, he finally got through to an editor who informed him they had no record of anyone named Lena Castellano working for them, freelance or otherwise. Are you sure? Ryan asked desperately. She showed me articles she'd done for you. Photos from protests, music festivals. Sir, I've been here for 15 years. If someone was shooting for us, I'd know. I'm sorry. Ryan sat in his car in a parking lot, phone in his hand, feeling like his entire reality had been reconstructed. Who was Lena? How much of what she'd told him was true? And where was she now with $8,000 of his money? 3 days passed. 3 days of Ryan calling, texting, driving to places they'd been together hoping to find her. 3 days of him checking his bank accounts more carefully and discovering months of small, careful drains he'd overlooked. $20 here, 50 there, 100. It added up to thousands. How had he not noticed? On the 4th day, she finally answered his call. She sounded tired. Hey, where are you? Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I can explain everything, Lena said. Then explain. Explain why you took $8,000 from my account. Explain why you don't actually live at the address you gave me. Explain why none of your friends actually know you. Explain why the magazine you work for has never heard of you. There was a long pause. I was going to tell you. Tell me what? About Morocco. I got an amazing opportunity. A real assignment, a big one, but I needed funds to get there to get set up. I was going to pay you back as soon as I got paid. You stole from me, Ryan said, his voice breaking. You've been stealing from me for months. It's not like that, Lena said, and now she was crying. Or maybe just sounding like she was crying. Ryan couldn't tell anymore. I never meant to hurt you. Things got complicated. My life is complicated. I have debts you don't know about. People I owe money to. I'm in trouble, Ryan. I needed help, and you were the only person I could turn to. So you lied to me? About everything? Not everything, she said softly. What we had was real. What I felt for you was real. Was. Ryan caught the past tense. Did you ever actually love me, Lena? The pause before her answer was the longest few seconds of Ryan's life. I loved who I was when I was with you, she finally said. I loved the way you saw me. The person you thought I was. I wished I could be her. I really did. It wasn't an answer. Or maybe it was the only honest thing she'd ever told him. Ryan closed his eyes. Where are you right now? It's better if you don't know, Lena said. I'm sorry, Ryan, for all of it. You deserved better. Yeah, he said quietly. I did, she hung up. Ryan sat there holding his phone, waiting to feel something. Anger, maybe, betrayal. But mostly he just felt empty. Hollowed out. He'd given her 6 months of his life, thousands of dollars, his trust, his heart. And she'd taken it all and disappeared like smoke. The next day, Ryan changed his locks. Filed a police report, though the officer who took his statement didn't sound optimistic about recovering any money. Blocked Lena's number and all her social media. His bank managed to reverse some of the charges, but most of the damage was done. Derek came over to help him pack up Lena's things, what little she'd actually left behind. Turned out most of it wasn't even hers. Borrowed jackets from other people. Books from library sales with other people's names written inside. I'm sorry, man, Derek said, boxing up camera equipment Ryan had apparently paid for without realizing it. I was so stupid, Ryan said. You weren't stupid. You were in love. Or you thought you were. Ryan's sister Nicole came by later with groceries and wine. She didn't say I told you so, which he appreciated. She just sat with him on his couch in his apartment that felt too empty and too quiet, and let him talk about how real it had felt, about how completely he'd believed in Lena, in them, in the possibility of a different kind of life. "What do I do now?" he asked. Nicole squeezed his hand. "You heal. And you figure out who you are without her." It sounded simple, but as the days turned into weeks, Ryan discovered it was anything but. The hardest part wasn't the money or even the betrayal. It was facing the truth that some part of him had known. Deep down in a place he hadn't wanted to look, he'd known something was wrong. But he'd chosen to ignore it because the alternative was going back to his safe, boring life. And he'd become so terrified of that boredom that he'd let himself be destroyed by the opposite. A year passed. Ryan rebuilt slowly. He paid off the debt, got therapy, which helped more than he'd expected. His therapist asked him questions about what he'd been searching for in that relationship, why he'd been so willing to abandon his own needs and boundaries. The answers were uncomfortable but necessary. He'd been hungry for something he couldn't name, a sense of aliveness, a feeling that his life mattered beyond balance sheets and quarterly reports. Lena had offered him that, even if the offering was poisoned. Work became bearable again. Ryan didn't love his job, but he didn't hate it either. It was just work. He started saying yes to things that scared him, but in healthier ways. He joined a hiking group, met people who liked being outdoors as much as they liked being safe about it. He took a pottery class on Thursday evenings, discovered he had decent hands for shaping clay. He even started writing, turning his experience with Lena into fiction, changing names and details but keeping the emotional truth. His therapist said it was a good way to process. Derek stuck around through all of it, patient and present in ways Ryan hadn't fully appreciated before. They reinstated their Sunday coffee tradition. Nicole called more often, checking in without being overbearing. His parents never knew the full story, which was fine with Ryan. Some humiliations were better kept private. Dating was weird after Lena. Ryan tried a few dating apps, went on some coffee dates that went nowhere. Then he met someone named Keisha at a work conference. She was an accountant from another firm, smart and straightforward in ways that both comforted and honestly kind of bored him. They went out a few times, dinner, a movie. Normal, simple dates where both people showed up on time and meant what they said. They were having dinner one evening when Keisha said, "You seem distracted. Is everything okay?" Ryan realized he'd been staring out the restaurant window, lost in thought. "Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Want to talk about it?" And for some reason, maybe because Keisha's directness felt safe, Ryan told her. Not the details about the money or the lies, but the feeling of it. The way Lena had made everything feel electric. The way she'd made him want to be different, do different things, live a different kind of life. Keisha listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stuck with him. "Maybe she didn't ruin you. Maybe she showed you that you were hungry for something, and now you have to figure out how to feed that hunger in a way that doesn't destroy you." Ryan thought about that a lot in the following months. It reframed everything. Lena wasn't the villain of his story. She was just a person, probably as broken as he'd been, doing her best to survive in the only ways she knew how. The real question was what Ryan was going to do with what he'd learned. He'd discovered that his careful, safe life wasn't enough. But chasing chaos wasn't the answer either. There had to be something in between, a way to be both secure and alive. He started looking for it deliberately, took bigger risks at work, proposing projects that excited him even if they made him nervous, traveled alone for the first time in his life, spending a week in Colorado hiking trails that challenged him physically and mentally. Read books he would have dismissed as impractical a year ago, had conversations that went deeper than surface pleasantries. He was building a new version of himself, not the old Ryan who played it safe, not the reckless Ryan who abandoned everything for a dangerous smile, something in between. Then 14 months after everything fell apart, Ryan saw her. He was at the airport, heading to visit Derek, who'd moved to Seattle. Standing in line at security, Ryan glanced across the terminal, and there she was, Lena. She looked the same somehow. Same dark hair, same leather jacket. She was with someone. A young guy who couldn't have been more than 23. The guy looked at her the way Ryan once had. Like she was the answer to questions he didn't know he'd been asking. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lena smiled. That same dangerous smile, the one that had pulled him in 15 months ago. The one that promised adventure and excitement and escape from ordinary life. Ryan felt the pull. That old magnetic attraction, the memory of how alive he'd felt in those early days. But then something else happened. The feeling passed. Like a wave that crested and broke and then receded back into the ocean. Ryan felt it, acknowledged it, and let it go. He nodded at her. Polite, distant, the way you'd acknowledge someone you used to know. Then he turned back to the security line and moved forward. His hands weren't shaking. His heart wasn't racing. He felt calm. Maybe a little sad, but mostly just calm. That chapter was closed. Whatever Lena was doing now, whoever she was becoming, it wasn't his story anymore. He had his own story to write. The flight to Seattle was smooth. Derek picked him up at the airport, and they grabbed lunch at this place overlooking the water. They talked about work, about Derek's new relationship, about the Seahawks' chances this season. Normal stuff. Good stuff. And Ryan realized something sitting there, watching boats move across the gray water. He was okay. More than okay. He was building a life he actually wanted to live. That night in Derek's guest room, Ryan thought about Lena one last time. About that first night at the jazz bar. The way she'd walked in, dangerous and smiling. How he'd wanted every moment with her. Consequences be damned. Did he regret it? That was the question he kept coming back to. The honest answer was complicated. He regretted the pain, the betrayal, the financial mess, the months of feeling like a fool. But he didn't regret learning what he'd learned. That he was capable of feeling deeply, that his safe life hadn't been serving him, that he needed more than routine and security to feel fulfilled. The story with Lena had ended badly. But it had ended. And Ryan was still here, still standing, still figuring out how to be both safe and alive. The dangerous smile had taught him something valuable, even if the lesson had been expensive. He'd learned that wanting every moment of something, and knowing what to do with those moments were two completely different things. Intensity wasn't the same as intimacy. Chaos wasn't the same as freedom. And the most dangerous thing wasn't Lena herself. It was his own willingness to abandon himself, to believe that another person's life could substitute for his own courage to live fully. Now he was learning to be courageous in smaller, steadier ways. It wasn't as exciting as those nights with Lena. There were no rooftop parties or spontaneous road trips. But there was something else, something deeper, a sense that he was building a foundation that could actually hold the weight of a real life. Ryan fell asleep that night thinking about the future instead of the past. About the pottery class he'd signed up for when he got home. About the hiking trip to Utah he was planning with his group. About the possibility of asking Keisha out again, maybe actually giving it a real chance this time instead of comparing her to the ghost of someone who'd never really existed in the first place. The story of the dangerous smile was over, but Ryan's story, the one where he figured out how to be fully himself, alive and present and whole, that story was still being written, and for the first time in a long time he was holding the pen with steady hands, ready to write whatever came next.